My 19-year-old daughter spent 7 months sculpting a modern art piece for my mom's birthday, expressing her love and admiration. The next day, we found it in a garbage bin. I didn't shout, I did this. 9 days later, my mother was screaming in panic. So I didn't exactly plan to spend my Tuesday knee deep in a garbage bin, but hey, life has a sense of humor like that. One minute, you're expecting leftover birthday cake and maybe some polite chit chat about party cleanup, and the next, you're pulling a sculpture out of a banana peel graveyard trying not to gag. The day had started too well. You know the type sunny calm, nothing wrong, which always means something is wrong, it just hasn't shown up yet. I pulled into my mom's driveway that morning with the innocent optimism of someone who still thinks logic exists in family dynamics. The birthday party had been the night before. Classy, pretentious, minimal sugar content, maximum small talk. The kind of evening where wine is swirled more than it's sipped and people say words like avant-garde with a straight face. I hadn't stayed long, but my daughter Ivy had been the highlight. She came bearing the gift. And not just any gift, a sculpture she had poured 7 months of her life into, carved, sanded, and loved into existence, wrapped like a sacred artifact. I watched her hands tremble when she handed it to my mom. She'd even written a letter, real ink, real paper, real emotion. Words like, thank you, admiration, and you inspired me. You'd think that would mean something, right? Fast forward to the next morning. I walk into my mom's living room, expecting to see the sculpture displayed front and center. Instead, there's a crayon drawing from my 10-year-old nephew Noah hanging in a frame like it belongs in the freaking Louvre. It featured a house with 3 windows, a sun the size of Jupiter, and what I think was a stick figure version of Grandma. Isn't it charming? My mom beamed. It's bold, I said. He has such a raw sense of form. Yeah, like raw chicken. But I nodded because what else do you do when your mother's aesthetic tastes veer into blind nepotism? So I asked casually politely where Ivy's sculpture had ended up. Mom didn't flinch. Oh, it's somewhere safe. You know how cluttered things got after the party. Safe, right. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Maybe it was bubble wrapped and resting in a closet waiting for the right shelf space. I told myself that. I clung to it. Then came the trash. I grabbed a bag, normal family visit behavior, and headed to the backyard bins. Opened one, expecting the usual smells of party aftermath. What I got was betrayal in 4D. Their half-submerged in moldy lettuce and something that might have once been shrimp was the sculpture. Ivy's sculpture, crushed, wedged between a champagne bottle and a greasy paper plate like yesterday's leftovers. I froze, like full body shut down. I knew that curve. Ivy had shaped it with her bare hands, over and over, smoothing it with that quiet obsession only artists have. My chest tightened. All I could think was, she can never see this. I reached in, but it was stuck. Heavy, awkward, buried. So I did the only thing that made sense at the time I climbed into the bin. Let me clarify. I am a grown woman. I pay taxes. I moisturize with products that contain words like peptide and hyaluronic. And there I was, knee-deep in garbage juice, trying to rescue my daughter's heart from a pile of party trash. The stench immediate and violent, like betrayal marinated in expired seafood. I gagged. I pushed through. I dug until I had it smeared in sauce covered in food residue I didn't care to identify, but it was whole. It was hers. Then I heard laughter. I turned. Noah, standing 10 feet away, holding up his phone. Auntie's in the trash, he yelled. She's actually in the trash. I tried to stop him. Noah put the phone down. Too late. He was already yelling into the house. Mom, Grandma. Come look, and that's when I heard the car door. Ivy, she had just pulled in. Panic. I tried to crouch down, hide like that was somehow going to fix it. She came around the corner frowning. Her eyes landed on me in the trash bin, holding her sculpture like some demented Oscar trophy. Her voice cracked. Is that? I couldn't speak. Covered in muck. Face red. The thing she spent 7 months on clutched in my arms. It's not what it looks like, I muttered. She stepped closer. Did Grandma throw it away? She already knew. She just wanted to hear it confirmed by someone who wouldn't lie to her. And I couldn't speak. Anything I said would break her more. She turned, walked back to her car, drove away. And I stayed in that bin frozen, holding what was left of her soul. I got home hours later, still smelling like betrayal. Ivy was already there, sitting by the door. She didn't ask if I saved the sculpture. Didn't say a word. Just walked past me to her studio and shut the door. I was left with the clay. 7 months of her life, her belief, her trust. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I cleaned. I scrubbed that sculpture like it was a wounded animal. Got rid of every smear, every speck of trash. Dried it, set it on her workbench. Quietly, no speeches, no drama. Then I sat down in the hallway outside her door, just sat there in silence. And I started thinking not about the sculpture, not even about Ivy, but about how we got here. How it always goes this way. How my family always breaks the people who try the hardest. I'm the older sister, 5 years older, which meant I grew up being the buffer, the pause, the kid who happened between my mom's reinventions and my dad's job promotions. He worked in finance senior level, always gone. Provided everything but presents. Expensive dolls from duty-free counted as bonding. And Mom Judith was always on a journey to reinvent herself. First a model local catalog stuff, not runway. Then an art critic, because why not started a blog? Joined something called the Art Appreciators Club, which sounds like a joke, but sadly wasn't. When she aged out of the beauty world, her words, she pivoted. surrounded herself with scarves and people who spoke in abstract metaphors about color theory and light. And then came my sister, Daniela, the miracle baby, the chosen one. I told myself it was just because she was the baby, that eventually the scales would even out. Spoiler, they didn't. Daniela could scream through a museum and mom would call it expressive energy. I once got grounded for drying my hands on a towel instead of air drying because apparently it messed with the paint oils. But I stayed quiet, I endured. Because that's what the oldest does. Right. Things shifted again when dad retired. You'd think it would bring a calm, a reset, a chance for balance. Instead, the money slowed down, but the lifestyle. That didn't. Judith had no interest in adjusting to a leaner life. She still went on her artist retreats, still hosted pretentious dinner parties with guests who argued about whether sculpture should evoke conflict or resolve. But the bills they slowly started sliding my way. First, it was little things covering the holiday turkey pitching in for a plumbing repair. Then bigger things, medical expenses, last-minute flights, and eventually their annual pilgrimage to some dusty adobe art commune in New Mexico. They never asked. They didn't have to. I never said no. Because that's what I do. I show up. I cover the gaps. I patch the cracks with my own time and money and silence. I thought I was doing it for Ivy. Maybe I was. But it became habit. And like most habits, it swallowed pieces of me before I realized it. Then Ivy was born. My daughter, my heart, my anchor. From the time she could hold a crayon, she was sketching not flowers or hearts like other kids, but shadows, movement, emotion. She lived in charcoal and sculpting clay in the pages of her sketchbooks. It wasn't a hobby, it was a pulse. I didn't push her toward art. It was already there, pulsing in her veins like her own language. Mom took notice quickly, of course she did. Ivy was her new project, took her to exhibitions, gave her books on Brancusi and Louise Bourgeois, even introduced her to her art friends, the same ones who once dismissed me as having a technical mind. For a moment, I let myself believe this time would be different. Ivy would be seen, respected, uplifted. She'd get the support I never did. But what I failed to see then, what hindsight now glares at me with, is that being noticed by someone like Judith isn't the same as being loved. Ivy didn't understand the ice under her grandmother's compliments. She called it honesty. She's not mean, Ivy would say. She just doesn't sugarcoat things. I love that about her. She holds me to a high standard. She believed it, really believed it, that if she worked hard enough, perfected something, she'd finally earn a real warm reaction. And for 7 months, she poured herself into that idea. She sculpted. She redrafted. She molded, broke, restarted, and refined. She skipped outings with friends, stayed up past midnight, rejected her own sketches with the precision of a critic. She wasn't just making art, she was creating a bridge one she thought would finally connect her to her grandmother. When she finished it, it wasn't just a sculpture. It was Ivy's heart in clay form. And then came the letter, handwritten, folded carefully, slid into an envelope like she was sealing in her vulnerability. I watched her seal it, though she didn't let me read it. At the party, she waited for the right moment to hand it over, quiet, reverent. She approached my mom like a hopeful pilgrim. Judith unwrapped the sculpture, stared at it for a moment, that felt far too long, then said, "It's good." That was it. No smile, no deeper reflection, no "you've grown," no. This part speaks to me, just a cold, flat good. As if someone had complimented the wine selection. Ivy smiled, nodded, said thank you. But in the car afterward, she asked, "Do you think she liked it?" I tried to deflect. She said it was good. She nodded slowly. "Right, but not very good." "Do you think she meant it like a B plus or like a low B?" She wasn't being sarcastic. She was analyzing every syllable, every flicker of Judith's expression, like decoding the Mona Lisa's smile, but with more heartbreak. She didn't say very, she continued. So maybe that means it's not there yet, or maybe she was being modest about liking it. What do you think? What did I think? I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and say she doesn't deserve you. Her approval is a trap you'll never win, but I couldn't. Not yet. So instead I said, "I'm proud of you. The piece was beautiful." She nodded, but the way her shoulders slumped, I knew my words were just static. She didn't want my pride. She wanted Judith's. And Judith was too busy framing Noah's crayon chaos to notice the miracle Ivy had handed her. That night, after I cleaned and dried the sculpture, I placed it back on Ivy's workbench like laying down an injured bird hoping it might fly again. I also found the letter. Flattened, oil-stained, folded among sketchbooks like a forgotten scrap. I didn't read it. I couldn't. What was I supposed to do? Say sorry. Grandma treated your love like compost. Eventually, I made myself a cup of tea I never drank. Stared out the kitchen window like it might offer answers. Ivy came out of her room just past midnight. Didn't say a word. Just walked straight into her studio. Stood in front of her sculpture, still caked in emotional shrapnel. She didn't pick up the letter, just stared at it. "She threw that away too," she whispered. I nodded. She didn't cry, didn't rage, just turned and asked in the smallest voice, why would she do that to me? And in that moment, all the truths I'd ever wanted to tell her about narcissism, about conditional love, about the rot that lives beneath polished appearances sat heavy on my tongue. But all I could say was I don't know, because anything else would have felt like an excuse. She nodded once and left the room. Her bedroom door clicked shut behind her, and I swear it sounded like a prison door slamming. I stared at the sculpture again, at the curve of it, at the devotion etched into every line, at the fragments of a young artist who just wanted to be seen. And then a thought settled in, dark and slow and sticky. If she doesn't do something with this pain, it's going to devour her. So I left, threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys. I drove to a 24-hour art supply store. Yes, those exist, usually populated by manic art students and men with strong opinions about brush density. I walked in with a basket and a mission. Brushes, clay, paint, canvases, sculpting tools. Enough material to rebuild the Parthenon, emotionally speaking. The cashier raised an eyebrow. Starting a school. No, I said, a war. By the time I got home, the house was silent. Ivy hadn't come out of her room. I didn't knock. I just tiptoed into her studio and laid everything out quietly, deliberately. No pep talks. No, I believe in you speeches. Just the tools. Like I was setting a table for someone starving who didn't know they were hungry yet. Clay brushes, palette knives, paints canvases. I even found a new sketchbook with thick paper, the kind that begs to be filled with something raw. I left the door cracked just enough to say, "This is here if you want it." The next morning around noon, I heard the door creak open. Ivy stepped into the studio, still in yesterday's clothes. Eyes dark rimmed from no sleep. Her face unreadable. She stood at the threshold for a long time, scanning the room like she wasn't sure she was allowed inside. And then, without a word, she walked in and shut the door behind her. 10 minutes later, I heard the first brush hit canvas. Then the sound of clay being dropped on the table. Then something cracked sharp sudden. Then silence. Then more work. I stayed in the kitchen with my untouched cup of tea and didn't move. Didn't knock. Didn't interrupt. She didn't need a mother right then. She needed space. Room to fight her way back. By the following morning, she still hadn't slept. I opened the door gently. She was crouched beside the sculpture. Her hands were stained with paint flecked with plaster. Her hair was tied up with a shoelace. And the sculpture. It wasn't the same. She'd broken it open, literally. Smashed it in with her fists in some parts, reshaped it in others. She'd filled the fractures with strips of sketch paper and blotches of color. There was rage in it now, vulnerability, brutal honesty. The letter she'd written to my mom. She'd shredded it and pressed the pieces into the sculpture itself like veins of history. You could still read some lines between the plaster. I love you. Thank you for always seeing me. I wanted this to mean something. There was also something new, a small digital photo frame looping silently next to the sculpture. I leaned closer. It was a video of me, in the trash, knees deep in filth dragging out the sculpture. My face red, my shirt stained, holding what was left of her heart in my arms. My breath caught. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "I already saw it," she said, still crouched. Noah posted it. In the family group chat, said it was hilarious. Aunt Helen dumpster diving for garbage art. I stood in stunned silence. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. One of them even put a raccoon emoji under it. I felt my jaw clench. And the rest of them, they laughed. I wanted to burn that group chat to the ground. But then she added something that stopped me. "So I used it," she said with a shrug. "If everyone's going to laugh at me, I might as well make it part of the work." I took a step back, looked at her, then at the piece, at the digital frame, at the torn letter fragments embedded into clay, at the chaos and pain and brilliance fused into form. And I thought, no, we are not letting this die in a group chat. That afternoon, I rented a gallery. Not a fancy one. A small downtown space that used to be a mechanic's garage. You could still smell oil if you stood near the back wall, but it had white walls, concrete floors, and no pretenses. Perfect. I brought the sculpture myself. Set it up in the corner under soft, neutral lighting. Hung nothing else. No plaques, no distractions. Just Ivy's sculpture. The shredded letter. The silent loop of me in the bin. It was a story told in 3 dimensions. When Ivy walked in and saw it, her mouth dropped. "You can't show that," I said calmly. "You weren't supposed to." She threw it away. "I know, and we're not hiding it." She looked at the sculpture, then the screen. "It's personal," she said. "Exactly." She was quiet for a while, then finally she whispered, "What if people don't get it?" "They don't have to," I said. "They just have to see it." That evening, I made a few calls. Critics I hadn't spoken to in years, friends of friends. Even a guy who once wrote a review of a sidewalk chalk mural like it was high Renaissance fresco. I told them the story. Told them about Ivy, about my mom, about the dumpster. Most didn't respond, but one did. He came by the next morning, walked around the sculpture, twice. Didn't say anything. Then he looked Ivy straight in the eye and said, "This belongs in our next show." She blinked. "Seriously." He nodded. "People need to feel something again. This feels like something." When he left, Ivy turned to me stunned. "What did you do?" I shrugged. I took out the trash. The show was 4 days later. Nothing grand, just a local group exhibition in the same mechanic-turned-gallery space. The crowd, a mix. Art students, collectors, casual gallery hoppers. One woman wore an entire peacock feather as a hair accessory. But they stopped. They didn't just pass by Ivy's piece. They stopped, watched the screen, read the torn letter, stared at the sculpture like it was whispering secrets. Some cried. One woman gasped, I felt that in my stomach, and jotted notes like she was meeting a prophet. By the end of the night, 3 people had emailed her asking for commissions. One man gave her a business card and offered her a spot in a prestigious residency. Another collector, serious type, cash in hand, made an offer. 14,000. Cash, no strings, no haggling. Ivy stared at the number like it was written in a foreign language, then turned to me and asked, "What do I do?" I said, "You wait." She blinked. "Why?" "Because this isn't the end of the story yet. We didn't take the offer, not yet." Ivy needed time to let the moment breathe, and so did I. Because this wasn't just about money. This was about claiming space, about finally being seen. The word spread faster than we expected. Photos of the sculpture surfaced online. Someone tweeted a clip of the looping video me in the trash holding the sculpture with the caption, "This hurt more than I thought it would." Then came the thread. It laid everything out. Ivy's grandmother threw away her sculpture. Her mom dove into the garbage to save it. And now the piece lived in a downtown gallery while the family behind it quietly collapsed. We didn't post anything. We didn't have to. The internet did what it always does. It connected dots, amplified emotions, filled in the gaps with commentary sympathy fury, and then it lit the match. First came the headline, Critic or Coward, How a Grandmother's Trash Became a $14,000 Masterpiece, subheading. She called it good. The art world called it transcendent. No names were mentioned, no direct quotes. But people didn't need names. Anyone who had spent 5 minutes around our family or followed Judith's blog or her quarterly gallery opinion columns knew exactly who it was about. My mother, the self-appointed oracle of modern art. The woman who once told me my wedding centerpiece looked visually anxious. And now she was a meme. One article dubbed her the grandmother who couldn't recognize genius if it wept in her driveway. Another labeled Ivy, the artist of refuse. For once, I didn't correct the spelling. People started reaching out, relatives, old friends, strangers who remembered Judith from some event in 2009 where she'd lectured about minimalist sculpture while sipping cucumber water. They all wanted to know, was it true? Was it staged? Was it performance art? That's when I knew the real storm was coming. 2 days later, it arrived. Front door, 3 knocks, then a fourth impatient one. I opened it slowly, just enough to remind them it was my house. There they stood, Judith in a pale silk scarf and tight-lipped fury, my father beside her silent, his beige slacks somehow looking apologetic. She marched in before I could stop her, of course. Dad followed. You have to fix this, she snapped. I leaned against the doorframe. Good morning to you, too. She tossed a copy of the Journal of Visual Culture onto my dining table. Ivy's sculpture was on the cover. Headline, Wounded Object is Truth. They're calling me heartless, she said. Irrelevant. I stared at her. Well, one of those is a matter of opinion. She didn't laugh. Dad cleared his throat, probably gearing up for some gentle mediation. Judith raised a hand to silence him. You're going to go public and say it was a misunderstanding, she ordered. Say the trash can was symbolic, that it was part of the concept, that Ivy and I planned it together. I blinked. Are you asking me to lie, or are you lying to yourself now, too? She hesitated, then doubled down. It was an artistic challenge, a critique exercise. I always believed in her potential. The air between us thickened. Mom, I said slowly, you didn't throw away her sculpture to inspire her. You threw it away because you didn't think it mattered. That quiet descended the kind that only happens right before someone explodes. Then softly she said, I'm being excluded. Good. We can't pay the mortgage, my dad said quietly, like someone trying to slide a confession under a locked door. I turned to him. That's not my problem anymore. He blinked. You've been helping for years. Yes, I said. And then your wife threw my daughter's soul into a trash can. So I stopped. Judith stepped forward. She was winding up for a monologue, something dramatic and self-justifying. But I beat her to it. You want a press release, I said. Here's when I cut you off. Financially, emotionally, legally if I have to. This was your choice. She gasped like I'd slapped her. You're punishing us, she hissed. No, I'm done pretending you didn't do this to yourself. And I shut the door before either of them could answer. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel guilty about it. 1 week later, Ivy's sculpture was invited to a group show in New York. Then another invite from Berlin. Then a curator emailed asking if she'd consider doing a limited edition print series based on the letter fragments and digital loop. Ivy wasn't even done with her second year of college. That original $14,000 offer, we turned it down. Eventually, the sculpture sold. $32,000 to a serious collector, one who looked at Ivy like she was holding lightning in her hands. He said, this is the most emotionally honest piece of art I've seen from someone under 25. Ivy didn't believe it at first. Still doesn't fully, but she started sleeping again, eating again, sketching again, creating again, not for approval, not for praise, just because she wanted to. And just when we thought the dust had finally settled, the legal notice arrived from Daniela, of course. Her email read like a PowerPoint written by someone who just discovered how to use italics. She claimed Noah, yes, the same nephew who filmed me in the trash, was the rightful owner of the video used in Ivy's sculpture. Because he filmed it, she said. That made it his intellectual property. She demanded 30% of the proceeds, retroactively. My favorite line. As his legal guardian, I'm obligated to protect his creative rights. I was halfway through laughing when the second notice arrived. This one from Judith. She was claiming joint ownership of the sculpture. Joint ownership. Her reasoning. That the piece reflected their shared relationship. That no artwork exists in a vacuum. That her role, though unintentional, had been a necessary catalyst. And thus she was entitled to partial credit. I almost wanted to frame the document and title it. Narcissist and Natural Light, we lawyered up. Ivy cried the night we filed the responses, not because she was scared of court, but because the betrayal felt like a second gut punch. It wasn't enough that they discarded her work. Now they were trying to profit off the wreckage. The court date came quickly. Daniela's case collapsed almost as fast. Her evidence was a shaky, unedited clip Noah had posted himself in the cousins group chat. No watermark, no copyright notice, no restrictions. Just a blurry video of me in the trash and a caption that read, my aunt is actually in the bin. Her lawyer tried to argue it was intellectual property. Our attorney raised an eyebrow and said, sure. But Ivy didn't steal it. She used it as part of a larger transformative artwork. It's commentary, it's expression, it's fair use. The judge agreed, said something like it's art, not piracy, and tossed the whole thing out like trash. As for Judith, the judge had one simple question. Did you knowingly throw away your granddaughter's sculpture and letter? She tried to spin it, of course, tried to brand it as performance art, claimed it was a pedagogical method, a way to push Ivy into emotional growth. She said things like, provocation is the highest form of love. The judge cut her off mid-metaphor, ruling. Ivy retains 100% ownership and profits. Because the work was transformative, autobiographical, and any so-called inspiration Judith provided was unintentional and frankly harmful. No appeals, no delays, judgment final. It hit the blogs the next day, ArtNet, hyper-allergic. The Guardian even mentioned it in a piece about the rise of Gen Z trauma art. TikTok was flooded with explainers. One stood out. From refused to revered the artist who turned family rejection into a $32,000 statement piece. My favorite headline came from an arts-focused Substack, the grandmother who tried to copyright rejection. After that, Daniela stopped calling. Judith went silent. Her blog, once a weekly deluge of unsolicited art critique, hasn't been updated since. And Ivy, she's still in the studio, still working. No digital loops this time, no recycled pain. Just her and the clay and the quiet hum of confidence returning. Last week I peeked in while she was sculpting. She looked up and smiled. Not grateful, not seeking approval, just present, which in this family might be the most radical art of all. It's been 3 years. Ivy graduated with honors. She's now a working artist with a private studio, a waiting list of commissions and students who look at her like she hung the moon. She teaches part-time at the very college that once terrified her. Apparently, once you've survived artistic betrayal and a legal battle with your own grandmother, no critique circle can really scare you. We haven't heard much from my parents or Daniela, but word travels. They sold the big house, moved into a modest place in the suburbs. Rumor has it Judith works part-time at a gallery gift shop, folding postcards next to prints of the same artist she once shredded in print. It's poetic, really. As for us, we're good. Not perfect, not healed in every corner, but better than we've ever been. And every time I see Ivy's hands working through new material, free from the pressure to impress or prove, I think about that day in the trash, about the decision I made, the stand I took, the door I shut. And I still ask myself from time to time, did I go too far or just far enough? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. You know, when I replay it all, the bin, the sculpture, the lawsuit, the gallery, I realized something I didn't at the time. That wasn't just Ivy's coming of age moment. It was mine too. Because up until that day, I'd spent my entire adult life tap dancing on the edge of my mother's expectations, always trying to be reasonable, polite, the bigger person, the bridge builder. I thought maybe if I stayed helpful enough, kind enough, quiet enough, I could maintain some kind of peace. But peace built on silence, it's not peace. It's suppression. And my mother, Judith, had always counted on that. On my willingness to not make waves. On the fact that I'd rather smooth things over than make a scene. She built an entire emotional economy around it. But that day in the garbage bin, I wasn't smoothing anything over. I was pulling something out that deserved to be seen. And in doing so, I stopped asking for permission. I think Ivy sensed that too. After the court case, after the gallery show, and the offers, and the blog headlines, we finally had a quiet night. No press, no clients. Just the two of us at the kitchen table eating microwave popcorn and staring at nothing. She looked at me and said, I thought maybe I'd be angry forever. I said, me too. And then she smiled just a little and said, but I'm not. That's when I knew she was healing. Not because things were magically okay, but because she could feel again. Create again. Be in a room with silence and not flinch. We kept the sculpture. Didn't sell it to the first collector, not even to the second or third. It eventually sold, yes, but after Ivy was ready. After she said yes. That mattered. Because it wasn't just a transaction, it was closure. And now that piece sits in a museum in Toronto. It's part of an exhibit called Reclaimed Art from Survival. Next to it, a short blurb. No family names, no drama, just this. Created by the artist in response to emotional rejection and personal loss, this sculpture combines traditional clay work with contemporary digital media to explore themes of transformation agency and generational trauma. People come from all over to see it, and they feel it. Not because they know the backstory, but because you don't need context to feel the pain and power in that piece. You just need a pulse. Sometimes I wonder if my mom has seen it. If she's walked through that museum on one of her art appreciation days and come face to face with the things she threw away. If she recognized the shape, the curve, the embedded letter fragments. If she realized that what she dismissed as good became immortal, part of me thinks she'd pretend not to notice. Keep walking, maybe even critique the lighting. But a deeper part of me, the part that knows her too well, suspects she did see it, that she paused, that she felt it, and that for once she had no words. I'm okay with not knowing. Some stories don't need epilogues, they just need endings. A few months ago, Ivy got invited to speak on a panel about emotional expression in art. She almost said no, said she wasn't sure she had anything valuable to say. I reminded her, you made the internet cry with a sculpture and a looped video of your mom in a trash can. She blinked. True. She went, spoke softly, didn't try to impress, just told the truth. Afterward, a young woman came up to her crying, said Ivy's story helped her pick up a paintbrush again, said she hadn't created anything in 2 years. Ivy hugged her, then went home and sketched for 5 straight hours. People ask me now, friends, followers, sometimes strangers who DM after finding the story through some article, how I feel about everything. About going no contact with my mom, about standing up to her, about cutting financial ties, especially after years of helping. My answer, I feel free. Not the kind of free that dances, the kind that breathes deeper, that stops second guessing, that stops waiting for someone else's approval before acting. Because here's the truth, they never tell you boundaries don't ruin families. Secrets do. Silence does. Pretending everything is okay when it's not does. And Ivy, she doesn't pretend anymore, neither do I. One time while we were cleaning out old storage bins, Ivy found a box of her childhood drawings. One of them was a sketch she'd done at age 7. A woman, tall, tired looking with a little girl holding her hand. The woman's face was a bit messy, almost erased and redrawn, like she couldn't get it quite right. She held it up. Is this you? She asked. I looked at it, tilted my head. Looks more like your grandmother. She studied it again. No, she said, this one listens. I didn't cry. I just nodded and folded the drawing back into the box. Some memories are better left intact. A few weeks after that panel, Ivy got her first solo show invitation. Not a group exhibit. Not a shared wall. Her own space. A real gallery. Clean white walls, polished concrete floors, the kind of place with soft jazz, playing quietly and free sparkling water near the door. She almost didn't do it. I don't want this to just be about the sculpture, she told me. I don't want to be the girl who made the trash piece forever. I got it. We all want to be more than our trauma. But I said, you're not just the girl who made that sculpture. You're the artist who turned pain into truth. That's the difference. She still hesitated. So I asked, what do you want to show? She shrugged. New things, brighter things, stuff that isn't so heavy. I said, then show them. And she did. The exhibit opened on a rainy Thursday, but the room was full, not just with art people or critics, but with people. Students, teachers, moms, daughters, a couple who drove from 3 states away. They didn't come to gawk at the scandal. They came because they saw her, the real her. The work was beautiful, softer in places, wiser in others. There were pieces with color movement, even humor. One sculpture looked like a balloon mid-pop frozen in clay. Another was a small series based on childhood toys abstracted but familiar like memory fragments. But at the center of the room, on a simple white pedestal, sat the original sculpture, the piece that started it all. Not as a stunt, not as bait, just as part of the story. There was a new addition too, a small placard beneath it. Ivy had written it herself. This sculpture began as an offering, became a rejection, and lives now as a reminder that value isn't always recognized by the people we wish would see us. But that doesn't mean we aren't worth seeing. People stood there for a long time. One woman cried. Another wrote a poem on a sticky note and left it under the pedestal. By the end of the night, Ivy had sold 4 new pieces and booked a month-long residency in Montreal. I asked her how she felt. She said, like, I can finally exhale. After the show, we went out for late-night pancakes. Just the two of us. Like we used to do after school when she was little and the world felt too loud. She buttered her toast and said, I used to think art had to hurt to be worth something. I paused, and now I think maybe art can come from healing too. We sat there in the quiet hum of the diner. Vinyl booths, the smell of burnt coffee, and the occasional clatter of dishes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was perfect. She reached across the table and took my hand. Not for long, just enough. You didn't have to climb in that trash, she said. I know I told her, but you did. That made her smile, a real one. The kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. We still don't hear from my parents. Or Daniela. There was one email about 6 months ago from Dad. Short. Just said, hope Ivy is doing well. We saw the article. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. Not really. Just done. Judith hasn't resurfaced publicly. Last we heard, she stepped down from the Art Appreciators Club. Something about creative differences. Her blog remains untouched. Her gallery columns have been quietly replaced by someone named Sienna who writes about sculpture with phrases like tender rebellion and emotional topography. Good for Sienna. Honestly, Daniela, according to Mutuals, is still furious. She's trying to pivot into being a parenting influencer now. Started a YouTube channel called Candid Mom, where she talks about respecting your kids' creativity. I couldn't make this up if I tried. Noah's in high school now, still filming things, still posting them. His latest clip was a time-lapse of a sandwich rotting. It got 34,000 views. The internet is strange, but Ivy, she's centered. She still has bad days like anyone, but she doesn't flinch when people say family. She doesn't hold her breath around compliments. She no longer sculpts for approval. She sculpts for herself. And sometimes, for the first time in a long time, she sculpts for joy. A few nights ago, she came into the living room with a new piece. Small, rough, still drying. It was a simple curve similar to the one on the original sculpture, but this time, it curled inwards like a shelter. Inside the hollow space was a tiny figure. Just a hint of a person. Tucked in, protected. What do you think she asked? I studied it. It looks like peace, I said. She smiled. It's called home. And I realized it wasn't about a place, or a family, or even a gallery. It was about her. She had found her own space, her own voice. And she built it piece by piece out of everything they tried to throw away. A few days after Ivy showed me home, I found myself standing in front of it again, this time alone. The little figure curled inside the sculpture's curve seemed even smaller than I remembered, but not fragile. More like intentional? Safe. It struck me how different this was from the first sculpture, the one born from pain, anger, and that aching need to be understood. This one wasn't asking for approval. It wasn't begging to be displayed. It simply was. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a story about Ivy's growth as an artist. It was about liberation. Hers, mine, maybe even yours if you've ever spent your life giving everything to people who only ever gave you back silence. We were sitting out on the porch a few nights later, tea in hand, the good kind this time, not the kind you forget on the kitchen counter during emotional emergencies. Ivy was sketching something on her tablet. Her brow furrowed in focus, that tiny tongue-between-teeth expression I'd known since she was 6. I broke the silence. You know, your grandma once told me that emotion in art was a crutch. Ivy didn't look up. She also told me macrame was derivative. We both laughed. It was a little too loud, a little too cathartic. The kind of laugh that comes with years of swallowing your truth. She was wrong, I said. About emotion. About you. About all of it. I know, Ivy said simply. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't always come in big declarations. Sometimes it comes in quiet confidence. A shrug instead of a spiral. A knowing smile instead of a need to prove anything. And I realized she no longer needed Judith to say the words she'd waited a lifetime to hear. You're good enough. Because she already knew she was. About a month after the solo show, Ivy got a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a DM. An actual handwritten letter. On textured paper. Elegant script. No return address. Inside was a single sentence. You were always going to be better than me. It was unsigned. But we both knew who wrote it. Judith. The handwriting was unmistakable, crisp, controlled, dramatic, even an apology. Ivy read it once, then again. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just folded it back up and slipped it into a drawer without saying a word. I waited a beat. Do you want to talk about it? No, she said, I think I just want to let it be. So we did. The letter stayed in that drawer untouched. Not a trophy. Not a wound. Just a final punctuation mark on a sentence that had already ended. People still reach out. Ivy gets invited to more panels now, university workshops, gallery discussions. She was even featured in an art documentary, Sculpting Silence, that explored how young artists are using personal trauma to create modern narrative sculptures. The interviewer asked her, what advice would you give to artists who feel like their work isn't being taken seriously? She paused for a long time before answering. Then she said, stop asking people who don't see you to validate your vision. Make the thing. Let it speak. Let you speak. It went viral. Some people called her brave. Others called her bitter. Ivy didn't care. She was too busy working on her next series. I've kept all the articles, not for clout, just for the record. A timeline of what happens when someone refuses to stay silent. My favorite still isn't from a big-name publication. It was from a small independent arts journal, probably read by about 6 people and a cat. The title, The Girl in the Trash Made Art Worth Keeping. It made me laugh. Not because it was wrong, but because it was so right. The thing is, I used to think that moment me in the garbage was humiliating. But now I understand it for what it was. A beginning. The precise moment I stopped playing the role of the silent daughter and started becoming the mother I needed to be. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found the sculpture in the trash that day. If I just let it be. If I hadn't climbed in. If I hadn't reached out or pulled it free or stood my ground when my entire family tried to rewrite the truth. Would Ivy have ever believed in her art again? Would she have ever found her voice? Or worse, would she have started sculpting for people like Judith? Trying to earn worth from people who measure everything in criticism and never in love. I try not to spiral too far down that road, but I do know this. We are all one moment away from letting someone else define our story. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is crawl through the filth to save what matters. Even if that means getting your favorite shirt ruined in the process. A few weeks ago, Ivy got an email from a student at her college. It wasn't a fan letter. It wasn't asking for advice or feedback or even a reply. It just said, I showed my mom your sculpture. She didn't say anything, but she hugged me. That's the first time she's hugged me in years. Thank you. Ivy read it in silence, then handed it to me without a word. I don't think I've ever felt so much pride in a single moment. Because that's the thing people don't always realize about art. Not all of it is meant to be beautiful. Some of it is meant to wound, to heal, to shift something just enough that someone who's been holding their breath for a decade finally exhales. And Ivy, she's creating that kind of art now. Not the kind that fits neatly in a curated home gallery with perfect lighting and overpriced wine, but the kind that gets under your skin, that stays, that doesn't ask permission to matter. She told me recently she's thinking about doing a book. Not just a catalog of her sculptures, but of visual memoir photos of her work journal entries raw. Thoughts, process shots. A chapter on the gallery exhibit, one on the court case, and one simply titled The Bin. I told her I'd buy a dozen copies and hand them out at Christmas. She laughed and said, we're not giving one to Grandma. I said, we're especially giving one to Grandma. We both laughed so hard we nearly cried. I felt good. Like forgiveness, but with boundaries still intact. It's strange. The deeper Ivy goes into her career, the more we talk. Not just about art, but about life, about love, about the things we carry. She asked me once, do you think you could have ever done what I did at my age? And I told her honestly, no. When I was 19, I was still trying to earn my mother's love with perfect posture and polite dinner conversations. I didn't even know rage could be used as fuel. But you gave me the space to do it, she said. I hadn't thought about that. But maybe that's what healing across generations looks like, not fixing everything, but choosing differently the second time around. So your daughter doesn't have to fight the same ghosts you did? A few days ago, we were cleaning out the attic. Ivy wanted to clear space for some larger pieces she was working on. We found boxes from my childhood photo albums, report cards, old art from school. In one folder was a sketch I'd done when I was around her age. A charcoal piece. Sharp, jagged lines. No real subject, just emotion on the page. Raw, honest. I'd forgotten it existed. Ivy held it in her hands like it was an artifact. This is good, she said, her voice low. I shrugged. It was nothing. Just a class assignment. No, she said. It's more than that. She looked up at me. Did Grandma ever see this? I laughed. Are you kidding? I think she threw it out before the charcoal even dried. She paused. Then she asked, did you stop making art after that? And for the first time, I admitted it. Yes. We didn't say much after that. We didn't have to. Because somewhere between the attic dust and that old sketch, a part of me realized I hadn't just saved Ivy from Judith. I'd saved myself too. There's a corner in Ivy's studio now where she keeps that old sketch. She framed it. Not as a statement piece, not as a masterpiece. Just as a reminder. She hung it next to a mirror. One day I asked her why. She said, because sometimes when I look at what I'm making and doubt myself, I need to see where I came from and who made me. I looked at the mirror, then at her. And in that moment, it hit me. She wasn't just seeing me. She was honoring me. Not for being perfect, but for being there. For climbing in the bin. For refusing to look away. For showing up. And staying. We still don't talk to my parents. It's not a grudge. It's just space. Judith sent one more letter. This time she signed it. Said she was sorry. That she didn't realize how much the sculpture had meant to Ivy. That she misunderstood. That she thought she was helping. It wasn't a terrible letter, but it was a decade too late. We didn't reply. Ivy read it once, then put it in the same drawer as the other one. Not to hold on to it, just to know where it was. That's healing too, knowing where the pain lives, but choosing not to pick it up again. Every once in a while, I check the museum's website, the one in Toronto that houses Ivy's sculpture. It's still there. It still draws crowds. Sometimes they update the description with new context. An excerpt from an art review, a quote from a visitor. Recently, they added this line. This piece, born from personal betrayal and reclaimed through resilience, reminds us that the things we discard often become the stories we cannot ignore. I think that might be true for people too. Sometimes what others toss aside becomes the very thing that defines us, not in shame, but in strength. It's funny, isn't it? How something as small as an unnoticed gesture, a sculpture placed in someone's hands, a letter folded with hope, can detonate an entire family legacy. I used to think that legacy was set in stone, that I'd always be circling the same emotional carousel with Judith, that Ivy would either become another version of me, quiet, obedient, always measuring her worth by someone else's silence, or another version of her cold-controlled, unwilling to admit when something hurts. But she didn't become either. She became herself. And the sculpture, that moment that climbed into the bin, it was the turning point. Not just in our relationship or her career or our family's story, but in the way I understood love. Because love isn't neat. It doesn't always show up in pretty packages and kind words. Sometimes it shows up as mud on your knees and grease on your shirt, as silent tears on a studio floor, as charcoal-stained hands digging through the wreckage of someone else's failure, whispering, I will not let them ruin you. I remember asking Ivy once, months after everything, do you think you'll ever forgive them? She paused, thinking. Then she said, I don't know if it's about forgiveness. I waited. I think it's more about release, she said. Letting go of the expectation that they'll ever become who I wanted them to be. That hit me harder than anything else. Because for years, I've been trying to parent Ivy while still trying to parent myself. Still waiting for the apology that would never come. Still hoping my mother would one day see me. But Ivy, she wasn't waiting anymore. And that's how I knew she was going to be okay. The house feels different now. Not quieter, but calmer. There's still art everywhere, but it's not frantic. There are candles, plants that somehow stay alive, sketches tacked to corkboards, notebooks half full with ideas Ivy hasn't figured out yet. There's hope in the mess now, and peace in the unfinished. I caught her humming to herself the other day while sanding a new piece. It wasn't a song I recognized, just a sound, a rhythm, a vibration of someone fully in her body and her process and her truth. And I thought, this is the miracle. Not the gallery exhibits, not the commissions, not the awards or the magazine spreads, but this, a girl who once curled herself around rejection like it was gospel, now standing in the light of her own self-worth, creating, living, free. So here we are. 3 years, one sculpture, and one family implosion later. I don't tell this story for pity or even revenge. I tell it because someone out there is holding their own sculpture, literal or metaphorical, in their hands right now, wondering if it's good enough, wondering if they should bother wrapping it up, delivering it, daring to hope. And maybe their Judith is already waiting to crush it, to call it good without meaning it, to toss it aside because it doesn't look like a mirror. If that's you, listen to me. You don't need their permission to matter. You don't need their understanding to be seen. And if they throw your masterpiece in the trash, find someone who will climb in after it with you. Someone who will dust it off, hold it gently, and say, this is still yours, this still counts. We didn't mean to go viral. We didn't plan for the sculpture to become an icon or for our family to become a cautionary tale in every art school from California to Copenhagen. But maybe that's what happens when you stop playing nice and start telling the truth. Maybe when you stop begging people to see you, the right ones finally do. And maybe, just maybe, the bin wasn't a setback. It was a portal. The place where Ivy stopped being a girl sculpting for validation and started becoming a woman sculpting for truth. So tell me, was I too dramatic? Too harsh? Too far gone? Or did I finally do what mothers are meant to do? Stand between their children and the things that would break them. Even if those things share your DNA, drop a comment, share your story, let someone else know they're not the only one. And if this hit you somewhere you didn't expect, subscribe. We're telling more stories like this, stories of art survival and the quiet revolutions we wage just to be heard. Because sometimes love doesn't sound like I'm proud of you. Sometimes it sounds like I took out the trash.